Hello, self-care coffee break number 7. We're going to move on from emotion for a few sessions, and we're going to look at breathing. Breathing is an incredibly important part of state regulation. It's an easy way of hacking into our autonomic nervous system, if you like. We can change our heart rhythm through breath. We can change our emotional state through breath. And we can change and increase our awareness. So breathing, one of my favorite tools to work with, and I love teaching people about breath. It's crazy that we do breathing all day, every day. And yet so many of us know very little about it. We make all sorts of assumptions. And even coaches, dare I say, may have a tool that they will teach you without understanding the physiology behind what they're doing. And there are no cookie cutter approaches. You want to breathe in a way that creates the response you want in that moment. So understanding that taking a breath in ramps your system up, it stimulates the sympathetic part of your nervous system, whereas taking a breath out kind of calms down and stimulates the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. And there's all sorts of other criteria around that, other pieces of information that are really interesting. In fact, my colleague Sarah Crothers and I have just written an ebook on breathing. So watch out for that. That will be launched very soon. It will be available through mbraining.com, and it will go into much more of the science and the depth behind it. But just to give you one of those little things is that as you breathe in more fully, and I'm going to talk about the word deep in a moment, but as you breathe in more fully and naturally, and you allow the bottom of your lung fields to expand, you stimulate more parasympathetic nerve fibers. There's a higher density of those at the bottom. So there's lots of good reasons for being very conscious and mindful about where you breathe from and how you breathe, and using that in a very deliberate way. So before we start a series of little self-care coffee breaks about breathing, I want to start with the word deep. And in fact, Psychology Today have just published an article around this too. It's becoming far more well-known, and the realization of how important it is. You may have heard people say, take a deep breath. And it may have been said with good intention. Let's just try that for a moment. As you're listening in, I want you just to take a deep breath in. Were you like me? Could you hear the breath going in? Did you feel maybe your shoulders coming up and the upper part of your chest expanding? The trouble with taking a deep breath in is that it can feel quite forced. It can almost be a gasp, and it can be very unnatural. So while the intention of taking a deep breath in is good because you want to get the breath to the bottom of the lungs to fire up those parasympathetic nerve fibers, the way we ask that of other people if we're working with someone else, or the way we tell ourselves to do it, is really important, and using the right words. And it doesn't matter which words you use as long as they generate the right response for you. So let's go back. What do we actually want? What we actually want is a beautiful, gentle, natural breath that goes to the bottom of the lungs to stimulate those parasympathetic nerve fibers. That will expand the rib cage at the bottom with very little movement at the top. It will mean that the diaphragm comes down. In fact, we want to breathe with the diaphragm. And because the diaphragm comes down, the belly comes out slightly. It's not a massive blowing up of the belly. It's just a gentle movement of 1 centimeter or 2. So I'm curious, what invitation to your body would you give? What form of words in order to generate that response? Some of the words I use when I'm working with my clients include gentle, slow, long, quiet, natural. Now, if I ask you to take a breath now, as I'm talking, that's long and slow, gentle and natural, what happens? I imagine it's very different from the breath after the instruction, take a deep breath. So that's my self-care coffee break for today, is being really conscious of your language so that when you begin to work with breath, and I recommend that you do get much more familiar with your breathing, that you do it in a way from knowledge, from understanding, and in a way that respects what your body needs, rather than trying to force it to take a breath that actually could stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, pushing you more into a stress response, which is probably not what you wanted. Of course, if you want to fire up the sympathetic because you want to get moving, that's a whole nother story. But in terms of self-care today, I want to focus on being able to regulate, bring down any stress response. So while we want a low breath and we want breath going in, it's not about volume. Many of us are over breathers. We're actually breathing too much. And what we can do is actually breathe out too much carbon dioxide, which is kind of counterintuitive. We need carbon dioxide in our body. The carbon dioxide is the actual gas that stimulates the next breath in. But also carbon dioxide is really key in the blood. It changes the acidity and it changes the oxygen shift across from the blood to tissues. So we want to breathe a long, slow breath. We don't want to do a quick, deep, gasping breath. Have a play. Talk to yourself. What words work for you to get that beautiful, natural breath that allows your ribs to expand sideways, front, back, allowing your diaphragm to pull down just gently and your belly to expand ever so slightly. Have a play. And we'll be working with breathing for the next few coffee breaks. So I'll see you soon.